I sponsored my brother's birthday, and he put me at the table for unwanted guests. I never expected my cousin Nolan to be the person who'd make me question everything I believed about family. But life has a way of surprising you, sometimes in ways you wish it didn't. That night, I stood quietly near the edge of a crowded banquet hall, hands buried in my pockets, feeling like a ghost in a room full of people who barely noticed I was there. The sound of clinking glasses and polite laughter echoed around me, but all I could hear was the beating of my own heart, loud, uneasy, and disappointed. My name is Weston, I'm 30 years old, and until recently, I thought I had a solid understanding of what it meant to be family. I come from a line of people who value loyalty, responsibility, and showing up when it counts. And for most of my life, I've tried to embody those values as best I could. I've always been the dependable one. The one people turned to when things fell apart. You needed a last-minute ride to the airport? I was there. Car won't start in the middle of a snowstorm? I'd bring jumper cables and hot coffee. Someone forgot your rent deadline and needed a loan? I'd figure something out. And the thing is, I never hated it. It felt good to be needed. To feel like I had purpose. To know that I could help the people I cared about. That's probably why I didn't hesitate when Nolan called me 3 weeks before his birthday celebration. "Hey Wes," he said, his voice casual as ever. "So, I know this is a bit last minute, but we're putting together something pretty nice for the big 3 to 5. Just a dinner, nothing huge, well, okay, a little huge. Hannah's organizing most of it, but you know how I am with logistics. Think you could lend a hand?" I didn't even have to think. Of course. Just tell me what you need. It wasn't an unusual ask. Over the years, I'd helped Nolan with everything from moving apartments to filling out mortgage paperwork. We'd grown up like brothers, our moms were twins, and we were only 14 months apart. We shared summer camps, birthdays, late-night talks, and the occasional sibling-style rivalry. But no matter how much our lives changed, new jobs, different cities, partners, we always came back to that shared foundation. So when he mentioned the dinner and hinted that it might be expensive, I assumed what he wasn't saying. "Just shoot me the invoice," I told him. "I'll take care of whatever you need up front." He laughed a little. "You sure? It's just the deposit for the caterer, I'll Venmo you back on Friday." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me through the phone. "No problem. Happy to help." I transferred the money later that day, just over $1,100. It wasn't a small amount, but I figured it would come back to me. And if it didn't right away? That was fine. I trusted Nolan. As the party date approached, I started to feel a strange kind of unease. It wasn't anything big, just a few small things that caught my attention. A joke Nolan made in a group chat about Wes always picking up the pieces, and a comment Hannah made during a call, "We're inviting all the key people, you know, the inner circle." I brushed them off. This was his birthday. I didn't want to overthink things. I told myself it didn't matter where I sat or how I was thanked, as long as Nolan had a good time. That's what family did. They showed up. The night of the party, I arrived early. I'd picked up a gift I was proud of, a leather travel bag from a local craftsman, the kind Nolan had pointed out once during a weekend trip. I spent more than I should have, but it felt right. Like a way of saying, "You matter to me. I remember the things you care about." The venue was elegant, a converted winery on the outskirts of town, dimly lit with warm amber bulbs hanging from beams. It was cozy but sophisticated, and you could tell no expense had been spared. I walked in, handed over the gift to the staff managing the presents table, and started looking for my name card. The place was arranged like a wedding. Long rectangular tables, linen napkins folded just so, silver place cards etched with initials. But mine? Nowhere to be found. I double-checked. Then I triple-checked. I walked past every table, brows furrowing deeper each time I didn't see Weston anywhere. At first, I thought it was a mistake. I walked back to the hostess area, half laughing, and asked one of the assistants, "Sorry, just making sure. There's a card for Weston Reed, right?" The assistant scanned her list, then shook her head apologetically. "I don't see that name, but we might have missed a few. There's open seating at the back table, if that's okay." The back table. Near the catering station. Away from the speeches, the head table, and the people being toasted. I tried not to let it get to me. Maybe it really was just a mix-up. Then I saw Hannah. She was talking to two older guests near the bar, sipping from a crystal flute of champagne. She saw me, smiled brightly, and waved me over. "Wes. You made it." I nodded. "Yeah, wouldn't miss it." "Hey, quick question, do you know where I'm supposed to sit?" I didn't see my card. "Oh," she said, her smile stiffening just a fraction. "Yeah, so we had to shuffle some things around last minute. Big turnout. Kind of overwhelming, honestly." "Sure, but there wasn't a spot for me at one of the main tables?" Her lips pressed together briefly. "We had to prioritize some of the closer folks, you know, colleagues, mentors. It's just a table, though. You're still here, and that's what counts." "Right. Just a table. Just a celebration I helped fund. Just a cousin I'd practically grown up with." I nodded slowly, still trying to hold on to my composure. "Got it." And then I saw Nolan. Standing at the front, surrounded by people in tailored suits and sparkling dresses, laughing like he didn't have a care in the world. He hadn't even noticed I'd arrived. At that moment, something in me started to unravel. Not in a loud or dramatic way, but in a quiet, bone-deep kind of ache. I didn't need attention. I didn't need applause. But I had spent years showing up for this man. Years of being the person he called at 1 a.m. when things fell apart. And now, I couldn't even get a seat at his table. I stood there, frozen for a moment, watching Nolan raise a glass in the middle of a group of people I barely recognized. His laugh echoed across the room, so carefree, so unbothered. And I realized something painfully clear. He hadn't noticed my absence at the table because he hadn't expected me to be at the table. I walked slowly toward the back of the room, to the table the assistant had pointed to. It was round, tucked near the catering station, out of the main light, and, unsurprisingly, without any assigned seating. It looked like it had been thrown together for extras. For the people you had to invite, but didn't plan to highlight. I sat down alone. It's a strange thing, sitting in a room full of people, music playing, voices bouncing from every corner, and yet feeling like you're in a soundproof box. I looked around at the crowd. Old friends of Nolan's from college. Business associates. Neighbors I'd never met. Some of them I recognized from stories he'd told, but many I didn't. I kept thinking, how many of these people have ever dropped everything to help him move during a snowstorm? Or talked him through a breakup at 3 a.m.? Or lent him rent money when he didn't even have the nerve to ask his parents? I had done all of those things. And yet I was seated next to the salad prep station. The anger came slow at first, like a pot simmering on low heat. But it started to build with every passing minute. It wasn't just about the seating. It wasn't about the table or the chair. It was about what the seating meant. This wasn't a simple oversight. This was a choice. A message. You're good enough to foot the bill, but not to sit among the people who matter. I took a deep breath and stood up. I didn't want to explode. I didn't want to cause a scene. But I also wasn't going to sit there like I belonged in the shadows of a party I helped make possible. I walked back toward the front, toward Hannah, who was now checking the layout on a clipboard. She saw me coming and gave me that same polished smile. "Wes, everything okay?" "No," I said quietly. "I don't think so." She blinked. "What do you mean?" I kept my voice low, but firm. "I want to know why I was seated in the back. Why there wasn't a spot for me anywhere near the front tables. I covered your catering deposit. I've supported Nolan through some of the hardest years of his life. And tonight, I'm basically invisible." Her smile didn't fade, but her eyes shifted, just slightly. "Wes, please don't make this into something it's not. We had to prioritize Nolan's colleagues and some family friends. It's not personal." I tilted my head. "It feels personal. Nolan was very particular about the table layout," she said, folding the clipboard to her chest. "He wanted to make sure people who've been important in his professional life were up front. You're still part of this, Wes. Don't let a table ruin the evening." But it wasn't the table. It was everything that came before it. The quiet dependence he had on me that was never acknowledged out loud. The unpaid favors. The lack of invitations to important gatherings, followed by casual apologies weeks later. The subtle erosion of respect, masked behind jokes and "you're just so reliable" compliments. I stepped back. "I need to talk to Nolan." Hannah's face stiffened. "Wes, Maybe now's not the best. But I was already walking away. He was standing near the center now, surrounded by a circle of guests, drink in hand, basking in the attention. He saw me coming and smiled. "Wes. There you are. Man, I was starting to wonder if you'd bailed on me." I stopped right in front of him. I could feel every set of eyes slowly turning toward us. "I've been here for nearly an hour," I said evenly. "Sat in the back, near the kitchen." His smile flickered, like a signal catching static. "Oh. Yeah, we had some last-minute changes. Seating got messy. But you made it, right?" I stared at him, waiting. He didn't say anything more. Didn't apologize. Didn't explain. Didn't even ask if I was okay. And that's when I realized something I'd refused to admit for years: Nolan didn't see me the way I saw him. I saw a brother. He saw a backup. A constant. A safety net that caught him every time he fell, and disappeared the moment he landed. "You didn't forget," I said. "You decided. Come on, Wes. It's a birthday dinner, not a wedding," he said, smiling again, but now it felt performative, like he was trying to brush it off before the crowd noticed. "I wasn't having it. I covered your catering deposit. Spent a week coordinating things when Hannah got overwhelmed. Bought you a gift I know you wanted for months. And I didn't even make the cut for a name card?" His expression changed. It was subtle, but it was there, a flicker of annoyance. "You're blowing this out of proportion," he said, taking a sip of his drink. That was it. The match that lit the fuse. "You think I'm blowing this out of proportion?" I said, louder now. More people were starting to tune in. "I've been there for you through every failed job, every crisis, every forgotten bill. I helped you furnish your apartment when your credit card was maxed out. And now, I'm not even important enough to sit with the people you do value?" The room went quiet. People were watching. Whispering. But I didn't care. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't swallowing the hurt. "I'm not trying to ruin your night, Nolan," I said, my voice steady. "But I'm done pretending I don't see the pattern. You only remember me when you need something." And I let it slide. Over and over. Nolan shifted, clearly uncomfortable now. "I never asked you to do all that," he muttered. I felt the air leave my lungs. There it was. The sentence that made everything clear. "You're right," I said softly. "You never asked. Because you knew I'd offer." And for years, that had been enough. The room was so quiet, I could hear the soft clink of a fork being set down 3 tables away. Nolan looked around, clearly uncomfortable, clearly wishing I would just back down. But I wasn't going to. Not this time. I had spent too many years biting my tongue. Too many birthdays, holidays, and rushed phone calls where I let myself be the one who flexed, adjusted, paid, lifted, and gave. And in return, I got polite thank yous and occasional texts that came only when something needed fixing. I wasn't asking for a medal. But I had reached a point where my patience, no, my self-respect, had run out. I looked at him, really looked at him, and I think he could tell something had shifted. His posture stiffened, and the charm he wore like a second skin was cracking at the edges. "I used to think you just forgot to say thank you sometimes," I said, my voice even. "That you were just distracted. Busy. Focused on other things. But tonight made something really clear to me." Nolan didn't reply. "You didn't forget about me," I continued. "You just didn't think I mattered enough to include." His jaw tightened. I could see the storm building behind his eyes, but I didn't stop. I wasn't afraid of it anymore. I had spent most of my adult life being careful not to upset people, careful not to make things awkward, careful to be helpful, easygoing, understanding. But that care had come at a cost. I looked around the room, at all the people who had front-row seats to Nolan's curated celebration. Some looked away. Some raised eyebrows. Some pretended to check their phones. And some were listening. Watching. Maybe they saw a man having a meltdown. But maybe, just maybe, they saw a man reclaiming something he had been too scared to protect for years. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a small box. Wrapped in matte navy paper and tied with a simple ribbon. The leather travel bag, crafted with Nolan's initials, embossed on the side, was inside. It had taken me weeks to save for it. I'd ordered it from a small workshop out of state, personalized and shipped with care. It wasn't extravagant, but it was meaningful. Thoughtful. Personal. Exactly the kind of gift you get for someone you consider family. I held it up for him to see. His eyes dropped to the box, then flicked up to mine. I brought you this, I said. Something I knew you'd love. I went out of my way to get it right. Because I believed, maybe foolishly, that it would mean something to give you something meaningful. He didn't say anything. His expression was unreadable. Defensive, maybe. Or embarrassed. I was going to give it to you tonight. Before the cake. Before the speeches. Thought I'd slip it to you when things calmed down. Maybe laugh about old times. I took a step forward, still holding the box. But I'm not giving it to you anymore. Now his eyes widened slightly, and he opened his mouth to speak, but I cut him off. This, I said, tapping the box gently, was for someone I thought saw me the way I saw him. Someone who valued our history. Our bond. Our loyalty. I paused, breathing in deeply before continuing. But now I see I've been holding on to an idea. An illusion of who you were to me. Or maybe just who I wanted you to be. He shook his head, voice barely above a whisper. Wes, come on. Don't do this here. I tilted my head slightly. Why not? You didn't seem too concerned about what I felt when you sat me near the staff entrance. More murmurs now. People were watching. People were definitely judging. And strangely, I didn't care. I'm not here to ruin your party, Nolan. I'm here to draw a line. Because this isn't about a seat at a table. This is about respect. And how little of it I've received from someone I've supported more times than I can count. His mouth opened again, but no words came. He wasn't used to this version of me. And maybe I wasn't either. But I liked him. The version of me who didn't just accept crumbs because he was told it was family. I stepped back, tucked the box under my arm, and gave him one last look. I hope you have a great evening. I really do. But I won't be part of it anymore. Then I turned. No applause. No dramatic gasps. Just a soft hum of tension in the air and the unmistakable shift of people making room as I walked past. I didn't look back. Not once. I walked to the coat check, took my jacket, and stepped into the cool air outside. The sky was dusky purple, the kind of color that fades slowly, patiently. There was a breeze that carried the smell of damp leaves and distant wood smoke. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt light. Not happy, exactly. Not yet. But lighter. Like I'd just set down something I didn't know I'd been carrying. I drove home in silence. No music. No phone calls. Just the rhythm of the tires on the road and my own thoughts weaving themselves into clarity. When I got home, I placed the gift box on my desk and sat down across from it. And I smiled. Because I realized something important that night. I had always assumed that drawing boundaries meant breaking things. Ruining relationships. Burning bridges. But sometimes, setting a boundary isn't about destruction. It's about protection. Of self. Of time. Of peace. And I was finally ready to protect mine. Update 1. 3 weeks have passed since Nolan's birthday dinner, and not a single word from him. No call. No text. No message explaining, apologizing, or even pretending that what happened didn't matter. Just complete silence. At first, I kept checking my phone, expecting something, anything. A late night, "Hey, man, sorry about that," or a half-hearted voice message beginning with, "Look, I was stressed out that day." But nothing came. What did come were the photos. The stories. The carefully filtered posts on social media. I didn't unfollow him, but I stopped engaging. I watched quietly as he shared pictures of the party, all smiles, all champagne flutes and arms around guests. Hannah posted too, an unforgettable night with the most important people in our lives. That phrase stayed with me longer than it should have. The most important people. I wasn't one of them. Not even close enough to warrant a chair, apparently. And just like that, the idea I had carried about our bond, our brotherhood, began to slip away. What surprised me wasn't the sadness. It was how fleeting it was. How quickly disappointment was replaced by something else. Clarity. It came in quiet moments, sitting with coffee on a Sunday morning, walking home from work, seeing a photo of us as kids tucked between pages in an old book. I started realizing that I hadn't just been hurt that night at the party. I had been tired for years. Tired of always being the one to show up. Tired of forgiving things that were never acknowledged. Tired of feeling like I was in a one-sided relationship with someone who didn't see the imbalance because they benefited from it. And the deeper truth? I let it happen. Not because I was weak. Not because I was naive. But because I believe that's what you do when you love someone. You show up. You forgive. You put your needs second because they're family. But love without boundaries isn't loyalty. It's self-abandonment. And that's what I've been recovering from these last few weeks. At first, I wasn't sure what to do with the gift, the leather bag still in its navy wrapping, untouched on the corner of my desk. A few times, I almost tossed it. Other times, I considered mailing it back anonymously. But in the end, I didn't do either. I kept it. Not out of spite. But because it's mine now. Not the bag itself, but what it symbolizes. A line in the sand. A decision to stop giving the best parts of myself to people who only recognize my value when it benefits them. I've started to feel lighter. That's the best word I can use for it. Like I took off a heavy coat I didn't realize I was wearing. I've reconnected with people I'd lost touch with, old friends who ask how I'm doing without any expectation attached. I've started running again in the mornings, something I hadn't made time for in over a year. I'm reading more, even went to a small concert last weekend by myself, and actually enjoyed it. And for the first time in a long while, my weekends are mine. Not reserved for someone else's emergencies or errands or, can you help me out real quick? I've found myself thinking a lot about how many people stay in toxic family dynamics because they feel like they don't have a choice. That walking away makes them selfish, ungrateful, dramatic. But the truth? Walking away can be the most grateful thing you do, for your own well-being. Because some people will never see your value unless you stop giving it to them for free. I don't know if Nolan will ever reach out. And if he does? I'm not sure what I'll say. Maybe I'll listen. Maybe I'll say very little. Or maybe I won't respond at all. I haven't decided. What I have decided is this. I am not going back to being the version of myself who tolerated being invisible as long as I felt needed. That man was kind, yes, but also tired. Drained. And silently resentful. This version of me? He still shows up, but only for those who show up too. He still gives, but not at the cost of himself. And he still believes in family, but not in suffering disguised as duty. So now, I want to ask you, anyone who's made it to the end of this long story. Have you ever had to walk away from someone who was supposed to love you, but only ever took from you? Did it feel like you were burning a bridge, or did it feel like you were finally stepping off one you've been holding up on your own? And if you haven't made that choice yet, what's holding you back? I don't have all the answers. I'm still figuring it out, day by day. But I know this much. Peace doesn't always announce itself when it arrives. Sometimes, it slips in quietly, like the absence of a weight you'd forgotten you were carrying. And when it does, you notice. And it feels like freedom. Thank you for watching the video, like it if you watched the video to the end and don't forget to subscribe. Have a nice day.